I know we kind of touched on it, but I want to talk a little bit about the military deployments
Yeah,
because to me, as a vet, that scares the shit out of me. And
yeah,
so, for those of you who don't know, Trump has authorized so far about 1,200 military soldiers to go down to the southern border to start engaging in um, border security uh, missions. I don't know how they're putting it, but I want to know from your standpoint, just as a lawyer, what is the legality of what we're seeing this happen on American soil? Are there any statutes addressing this?
yes.
And I think most important for me is I know they can't do this during a non-emergency situation, but like, is it really possible for him to declare this an emergency to
State of
circumvent
emergency. Yeah.
Ah,
all of the safe
okay.
the this? I know. Look, he's like, I'm ready. Let's go.
You've raised several issues there. Okay, let's first of all deal with legality.
Okay.
There's the Posse Comitatus Act, which was passed as a part of the ending of Reconstruction in the 1870s. And what that says is the American military is not supposed to be used in the civil context unless there is an emergency. Now, National Guard troops, however, can be used by governors because they don't fall under that. And so you do have governors in Texas and Arizona, a few other places, sending National Guard, where most of them just kind of walk around and patrol a little bit and kind of send people over to ICE. They don't do all that much, but they
Right.
are a force multiplier for the Immigration Service. Okay. But if you're going to use real American troops, you're going to run up against the Posse Comitatus Act. Now, can Trump declare emergencies? This gets to a question of constitutional structure. The United States Constitution actually gives the president very few powers.
Hmm.
I'm going to say that again. The United States Constitution actually gives the president very few powers, very few direct powers. Most power that the president exercises is done by acts of Congress. The entire Environmental Protection Agency, for instance, is done because of the Environmental Protection Act. And the president executes those laws according to acts of Congress. All these departments, everything is done by that. The president has an obligation to follow Congress's directives as to the spending of money. They allocate money for this in the budget, and the president is obliged to do it, which Donald Trump wants to totally violate and argue impoundment, which Richard Nixon lost on that issue. Okay. Now, there are certain acts which give the president, in certain circumstances, the power to declare national emergencies. 9/11, George W. Bush came in and declared a national emergency. It was perfectly appropriate under the statutes involved there. There is not that consensus here about this being a national emergency, despite the sell job of every administrator. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard gets on and they're talking about securing and protecting the United States, the Homeland Security, and all she wants to talk about is the invasion of illegals. And that's her words. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Don't mean to use the pejorative, but that's her words. That's what's perpetuated to lay this groundwork. I'm sorry, a bunch of people wanting to come here to work in, picking lettuce are not an invasion. It is not Japan bombing Pearl Harbor. It's just not. So that is a problem. Now, is he going to get a pass for 2 years from this particular Senate and House of Representatives? Maybe. But those statutes usually have provisions like within 60 days he has to come before Congress and justify the declaration of emergency. Look, even emergencies like a hurricane, there's a declaration of emergency, but the statutes are provided by Congress, which allows the president to do. Nothing in the Constitution says the president can declare an emergency after a hurricane. It's a statute. And
Which, even speaking of this specific thing, look at the LA fires and how Mexico sent some of the best firemen over to assist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are stories of many people whose gardeners rounded up all their friends who don't have documents and came and helped save houses.
Yep.
That we're working in with not credit.
And that, it really is amazing too that all these people, the undocumented folks here, Mexico, Canada, that they're still willing to help after being kicked in the teeth so many times by, we know it's Trump and MAGA and the GOP, but they represent us right now. So it's like the fact that they're still willing to, it just shows that they are indeed good neighbors, and they are willing to work with us. You know, we just got to stop playing the stereotypical egotistical Americans and actually come to the table in good faith and get some actual work done.
Anthony Bourdain, the great chef, had a great comment about that. And he said, I never once saw a native-born kid come into a restaurant and want to start as a dishwasher, work his way up to busboy, all the way up to running the restaurant. Never saw an American kid do that. I only saw immigrants do that. And predominantly, now there's exceptions, and you can make broad generalizations, but I'll make a generalization. Generally speaking, these are folks that appreciate the value of a job and the country that gives it to them.
Amen.
And they appreciate that greatly and are still willing to fight for the American dream.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a really good point and perspective. Is I think they have a much better picture of what they're actually fighting for and what they're supporting than a lot of us do. That's a good point.
And their children. Yeah.
So speaking of children, what I think I had it here. Let me get. So I know we already talked about birthright citizenship a little bit. My question is there anything that these undocumented folks can do to protect their children? And one of the things I wanted to ask is, can Trump circumvent this part of the Constitution using the Supreme Court?
Right now, no. And any simple reading, and by the way, when I talked about jus sanguinis and jus soli, I was talking about it from an originalist point of view, which several of the worst justices on the court profess to be originalists.
Yeah.
You can't take an originalist point of view and ever say that the president can overturn a part of the Constitution and birthright citizenship.
That's the lifeblood of the Federalists that are on that Supreme Court.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But that being said, I have absolutely no faith in Justices Clarence Thomas or Samuel Alito to do this. I have great faith in other justices, but not those two. And if they succeed in getting a few others to go their way, then there could be a problem, and it would be widely kind of denigrated, as was the decision about presidential immunity. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that. Nothing in the Constitution provides it. But they created that doctrine out of whole cloth because John Roberts was a great disappointment on that, and the other justices went with him. Not the other, the other justices, but led by Kate.
We know.
Believe me, Alito couldn't blame his wife on this one, so don't worry about it.
Oh man,
it is what it is.
So I do not think that this court, even this court, would go so far as that. But I wouldn't put anything past Alito or Thomas.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. So what happens to the kids if their parents are taken?
Well, okay. That gets to the issue of separation of children. Remember, in the first Trump administration, that was a terrible debacle from a public relations point of view, which even kind of cowered Donald Trump for a while.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't like that. They do that again in the country. That would predominantly happen at the border. Now they're going to start doing it in the country with children that go to school with my kid and are nice little kids. That's a problem. The children are U.S. citizens if they're born here, and they have a right to U.S. citizenship, and they can stay here. And you're now separating children from their parents because you want to make some big MAGA political point. That looks really ugly. Now you can do it legally, because you can deport the citizen, but the child is, you can deport the non-citizen, but the child is still always the citizen and has the right to stay here. If I was a parent, I would look for a contingency, an aunt or an uncle or someplace those kids can go, or a friend, and make sure they're okay.
Make a
plan. Because the parent might be in immigration proceedings for a while. And by the way, let's talk about this issue of anchor babies. Anchor babies is a myth. I will give you a theoretical way that you can have an anchor baby. Parent comes in, is undocumented. The baby's born. The baby waits till the age of 18 or 21 years, and then when the baby comes of age, can apply for adjustment of status of their parent, which will take about 8 years. So theoretically, after some 28 years, let's say 25 to 30 years, you could have an anchor baby actually do the anchor baby job. That's how that would work. So the idea that you drop a kid here and your whole family gets citizenship is utterly and totally false. Yeah. It'll take you at least 30 years, and by that time, half the people are dying of old age. I mean,
yeah, you got to do it like Melania. You come in on a visa, marry a rich guy, and then have them send for the rest of your family with visas.
Right. And get all her parents and everybody else.
Get everybody here.
Okay.
I guess Melania really is pretty smart, isn't she?
Oh, I kind of think so. I mean, I don't know what prenuptial reads, but I'm sure it's not.
I think she might have gotten raked in the prenuptial, or she might have already left. Oh my God! Please make it stop.
Be best, Ryan. Be best. Come on.
Not me, brother. When they go low, I dig the hole. Mm-hmm. So, actions of government officials. So now my final question before we get into the little positives are, what my worst case scenario is Donald Trump having Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., all his loyalists do the worst possible things imaginable while they're in power, and give them the promise, or he already gave them the promise of, I will give you a pardon before I leave for anything that you do. You just have to do what I need you to do. And that is my worst fear, that is what's going to happen. How probable is that?
Well, I have to give some criticism to the Biden administration. The first time really a pardon power was exercised in that way prospectively was Ford's partisan of Richard Nixon. Yeah. He pardoned any future possible prosecution. Well, Joe Biden turned around and did the same thing, and I regret that he did that. And this is separate from the pardon of his son. I regret that Joe Biden did that, not the least of which is if Donald Trump wanted to chase after Anthony Fauci, bring it on. Anthony Fauci did a brilliant job, the best that could be done with COVID, and let him just take on Anthony Fauci and whoever else he wanted to do with that. But Joe Biden did a prospective pardon, which then gives Trump plenty of precedent to justify his prospective pardons. And this is precisely the problem with the immunity thing, because now you have a president who thinks he has absolute immunity, who then plans to break the law and have his minions do it, and then gives them a pardon on his way out the door.
Yeah.
And that is precisely the problem that I think Joe Biden created by his exercise of the pardon power. I am a great proponent of the Biden administration. It's underappreciated, and it will have a better place in history than certainly the person who preceded him and the person who followed him. But
Robert, you do know Trump is a crook. He was going to do it no matter what, regardless of what Biden did.
Oh yes, I fully agree. But it takes.
He's just saying it gave him
legitimacy in an area that should not have been given, and this expansion of the pardon power is a problem.
So basically, my worst fear. Got it.
Awesome. Well, he could do it. Now, let's not forget though. If there's a change in the composition of the Congress, you then can have articles of impeachment, and I believe there will be issues coming up that will justify that. And if you have a change in the Senate, you're going to have a bigger change, but a few Republicans, if they have the courage to come along, this man could be convicted of an impeachment. And then all bets are off, all criminal charges are resurrected, and he is once again amenable to prosecution.
You're talking about... Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was just going to say, do you think that might be the Democrats' long play?
Very well could be, but it depends on the numbers they get and and what Donald Trump does.
A little risky too.
And this is by midterms you're talking about, taking back over the Senate.
Midterms you can't do it till then because nobody's articles of impeachment cannot leave the House as long as he's being protected by his minions. And
right.
There's no point.
How close do you think we are to an amendment to the 14th Amendment?
I frankly don't think amending the Constitution is a pretty hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think, look, let's just keep some numbers in mind. Donald Trump won a decisive victory in the Electoral College.
Yes.
It was not a landslide. It was a decisive victory.
Correct.
But he did not win a majority. And I'm tired of people saying that. He won by 49 point something percent. Now, at the risk of doing higher math here, last I heard a majority is 51.
I honestly say majority. So, okay.
Yeah. The majority is 51%. He did not win a majority of the electorate.
Good point. Okay.
Now, don't forget, Kamala won 48 point something percent too. So just 1 point. He won the election by only 1.5 million votes, the popular vote. Now, he did win the popular vote, but only by 1.5 million votes. He lost it to a greater number, 2 to 3 million, to Hillary Clinton. So don't forget that.
Yep.
So he doesn't have a majority. He does not have a mandate. And that's the groundwork he wants to use to claim that he can change the 14th Amendment and have a constitutional amendment to change that. That will be extraordinarily difficult.
Well,
it's difficult even if he had the numbers to do.
And I think even if you look at Hegseth's confirmation vote, I mean, if you go look at all the confirmation votes before him, like it was like 98 to 1, 96 to whatever. His was like 50-50, so
J.D. Vance was the tiebreaker.
So like you said, there's no way where they're sitting right now, there's no way they get enough to amend anything. Thank God.
Kind of 3 ways to amend the Constitution. The most typical way that's been done 26 times has been you get a resolution out of 3/4 of both houses of Congress. Then you send it out to 3/4 of the states have to ratify. Well, that's extraordinarily difficult. The EPA amendment couldn't pass. It's one state short. That is hard to do. You could also send out and have different state constitutional conventions and then ratification. That was done for the 21st Amendment, by the way.
Okay.
And that was the only one. And by the way, the 18th Amendment, the 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment was prohibition, and the 21st Amendment, to avoid these dry state legislatures, they had different constitutional conventions than did it by that mechanism. It was the only way to do it. And if you want a smart way to figure that out, just think, what's the drinking age in some states? 18. In other states, it's 21. So you always remember the 18th and the 21st Amendment that way.
Well, thank God we protected America's rights to vote in the Constitution, or right to drink, but not women's right to, think for themselves.
I have to give you the pushback. We actually don't have the right to vote protected in the Constitution. We only have the right in the 15th Amendment not to be prevented from voting on the basis of race or previous condition of servitude. The right to vote is defined by each state. So there's not really a national standard on that.
And there's a lot of suppression that took place